What's up, everybody? Welcome to BioS3 Raw TV. Do not adjust your computer screens. You did not accidentally click on RXmuscle. Yes, that is Dave Palumbo. And yes, you are on BioS3. Why is Dave Palumbo on BioS3? Well, Dave, first of all, thank you for being here so much and taking the time to do this.
Anything, of course. You came on our show, so it's only fair, right? I got to give it back.
Well, see, the thing is, you're always doing the interviews now, and I think a lot of people forget or don't know, honestly, what you've accomplished, what you've done, and who you actually are outside of. Now, I consider you a journalist. You go after information to find out, the truth and try to spread the word and stuff. But I think a lot of people forget what you have done in the past and how you even got to this point. So I was like, you know what? Rather than having Dave be the one to ask all the questions and really, not talking about what he's accomplished, let's throw him on there and, do something that nobody else is doing for him.
Well, I always say that I am nobody, no one special that is. I just do what I like, and if people want to watch it, I guess you do the same thing, Jerry. So, you do what you like, and if people want to listen, then they will. If they don't want to. And we have people who obviously are interested in what we're saying. So, that's, to me, that makes it and encourages me to want to work harder, I guess, because I see that people do enjoy the programming. Growing up, I was always, in the bodybuilding world, I basically read the magazine 6,000 times over and over and over because there was no other information to be gotten. There was no internet. It was a very hard, I guess you could say, industry to find out what was going on. You didn't know who won the Olympia for 3 months, until the magazines came out. Nowadays, you know sometimes before they even make the decision, who won because everyone's there on the spot with their phones filming. So it's a brave new world. So, I wanted to, as I saw that technology developing, I said, here's a great avenue for me to actually do what I always wanted to do, which was TV programming, and it was just too expensive to do it back in the 90s and early 2000s. Technology wasn't there. So when I saw that I knew it would be there eventually, I said, this is where I got to be,
Absolutely. I think the first time I met you was in '97 in Boston at the John Hancock Auditorium.
Wow.
And you were guest posing. I'm going to actually flash up a couple of pictures. I actually have actual photos that I took of you there. I think you were in the 320 or 330 range. And I remember just going, holy shit. I mean, Dorian guest posed. I mean, at that time, you were actually one of the first guys. It was like you, Nasser, Kamali, and a few of the other guys that were over the 300-pound mark. And because of you guys, that actually sent a benchmark for myself to try to hit. I almost killed myself trying to hit 300 pounds. I got to 272 and almost died. But it was like I had to hit 300 because that's where you guys were at. And one question that I've always wanted to ask you, it's never came up, was the bags of cheeseburgers. Every time I saw you somewhere, you had like a bag of cheeseburgers, and it was either McDonald's or Burger King. It didn't matter what place it was. And I'm like, how is this guy staying so lean and eating all these damn cheeseburgers?
Well, first of all, it wasn't just any burger. It was McDonald's. I do not like Burger King. I'm going right on the record here. Saying I don't eat Burger King. It was McDonald's. And I want to also go on the record as saying Kamali was 300, but he was fat, so that doesn't count. But Nasser was legitimate. Dorian was legitimate. Greg Kovacs was legitimate. And I was in that group. But I found at some point, Jerry, that my metabolism got so fast as I started adding muscle. Not in the beginning, but probably when I went over 260, 270, that if I didn't eat a little bit, like I was a very clean eater. I still am a clean eater to these days. I just like the way clean foods make me feel. And I don't like junk food. I'm not a junk food eater. So for me, it was tough to get enough calories in. And for some reason, I don't know if you want to call it, they like to call the anabolic chicken in Kuwait. I call McDonald's the anabolic beef because when I would eat that stuff, man, I would grow. I was at a point probably for about 5 years where I ate it every single day, at least once a day, and sometimes once in a while I would do twice a day. And people knew when promoters would fly me in, I was a cheap date. Bring Dave to McDonald's just when he gets off the airplane because that's all he wants. Whereas most of these guys got to go for a steak dinner or the Outback or this place, Ruth's Chris. All I wanted was my McDonald's because that's what made me grow. And I had a whole routine. I would eat 6 cheeseburgers on 2 buns. So it was like 2 triple cheeseburgers, a large, or at the time before it was politically incorrect to say supersized, I would eat a supersized fry. I usually have a Diet Coke with that, and I would eat 2 apple pies, and that was my meal. I would do that every day. I would wake up, I'd go to McDonald's. They knew my car. They had my meal ready for me. I'd sit there this is when people read the newspaper. I would read the newspaper, and I would eat my meals. And a lot of times, I didn't have an office back then, so when I would do consults with people, I would actually meet them in the McDonald's. I had my own booth there, and it was an ongoing joke. But I for many years, the McDonald's in Wanto was my home away from home, and it worked for me. I don't think other people could do the same thing and get the same results. A lot of people might just get fat from it, but when you're eating, when you got to eat 12 servings of something a day, I was doing 6 or 7 shakes, I was doing 5 meals. If I could make one of those meals enjoyable, it was way easier to get it down.
Dave, I was one of those people that got fat doing it. I saw you do it, and I was like, that's got to be the key. And boy, did I get fat. I mean, I got fat because I ate too much, but I mean, the trips to McDonald's absolutely made me fatter. It didn't help. All right, because I kind of want to transition from that into about how then you were in the 330 range, and what are you weighing around right now? I know you're super lean still.
The heaviest I got was 319. I'm not jacking up my numbers. I was 5'10", 319, and believe me, I couldn't get above that. That was the heaviest I ever weighed in, and I was very uncomfortable at that weight. I was uncomfortable at 300 pounds, but I was very uncomfortable at 319. After that year that I had hit 319, which I think was 97, I don't think I ever went that heavy again. I don't think I ever went over like 305 or something like that, or because it didn't serve anymore. I knew I didn't really need to get that much bigger, and I didn't need to. It was just too. Like I said, I had a feeling I was going to do some damage to myself, so I just kind of laid back a little bit, and I was like, this is enough. But what was the question? I just distracted myself from the question.
So your weight was around 319 at your heaviest. What do you weigh right now?
Oh, what is it now? So when I stopped, competing in 04, I went on hormone replacement. I couldn't get my weight under like 265. I mean, no matter why, because I was still eating a lot of food. Because I figured, well, if I'm not going to compete, I'm in this ritual of 6 meals a day. At this point, I had gone down to 6 meals, and I wouldn't go below that. So I had to start taking meals out and starving myself a little bit, and to get my weight down, because I wanted it in the 225 range. And initially, it took me a long time. It took me like 5 years to get it down that low, because muscle just doesn't go away. And then as my shoulders and my injuries got worse, really my shoulder, the weight came off a lot faster, and then I tore my quad in 2012, and I couldn't train for like 6 weeks, so that made it even worse. So right now it's about 205. 200 to 205, it fluctuates around that. I'm very comfortable with that. I wouldn't even mind going a little lower if that's the case. And I'm getting a shoulder replacement done in July, so I probably will go lower because I won't be able to go to the gym for probably 6 to 8 weeks. So, to me at this point, as long as I'm lean and I'm ripped, I'm good, because that's my calling card. And I think that's what, that defines health to me. When you have very low body fat, you look good, your face is well defined. People say I look younger now than when I competed, 15 years ago. So that's probably the case only because, we hold excessive amounts of fluid when we're on anabolic steroids, GH.
Now, how mentally does it mess with you at all? I mean, a lot of the guys, they retire, they're not competing anymore, and they keep that body weight. They stay up, around 270, 280, 290, and you're like, holy shit. Like, I mean, obviously it's not good for you, but do you think it's like a mental thing that they can't get their weight down?
Yeah, I think that they identify themselves as being this big person, and they think that people won't respect them or won't, think that they're special anymore if they're not that big. And that's never been my thing. My thing, when I was a runner in college, I was about 165 when I got there. But all the other runners were like 140. So I'm like, well, I got to be a 140 then. And so I used to starve myself. I got myself down to 140. It took me 2 years, but I did it, running 12 miles a day and starving myself. So, I always was about set a goal and achieve that. And my look after running was I wanted to get huge, But I didn't want to get, monstrously huge. I wanted to be Sylvester Stallone huge. Then I wanted to be Arnold huge. Right. And then beyond that, Dorian huge. Now I want to look like, I'm an athlete. Like when I go to the airport now, people think I'm an MMA fighter. That's what I always get from them. Oh, you must for WWE or something like that. That's a good look for me. That's the kind of look. I'm looking for an athletic, ripped, lean look where people see me and say, hey, this guy must know something. I want to ask him questions. But and the funny thing is that the general public, people who come up to me think I'm huge. They're like, oh, wow, you're big. You look at those calves. I'm like thinking, holy mackerel, I'm 100 pounds lighter. No one will even believe it. If I don't, thank God I could show someone a picture if they ask, what I used to look like. But Yeah, you know, I don't identify with that image anymore, because to me that, at my age, at 49, would be a very unhealthy way to be. And I know that I don't want to shorten my life right now. I want to live as long as possible, and I want to be physically able, you know, during these years. I mean, the worst thing is to get old, live a long time, but be miserable and in pain and be sick and be diabetic and have heart disease. I don't want that. So I eat really well. I lowered my body weight. My blood pressure is good. You know, I check all my vitals. When I go for blood work, I have perfect blood work. It's almost unbelievable, because I've never seen blood work of my own that was, all the numbers were normal. I actually feel average now, to be honest with you. But it's good, because at this point in my life, you know, I have a 17-month-old baby. I have another one on the way in December. So I want to be around, you know, I want to be healthy. I want to be able to, you know, move around and you know, screw around with my kids, you know, as they grow up, and watch them grow up. So my goals are different. And I always tell people, you have to recreate yourself, because if you don't recreate yourself constantly, you're going to die young. If you still want to be that bodybuilder you were when you were in your 20s and 30s, and it's just not feasible anymore, put Dexter Jackson aside. He's an anomaly.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to wind up dying young. You will. You will get a heart attack. You'll get a stroke. I see it all the time. I mean, how many countless bodybuilders in their 40s recently have we seen die? And it's scary. That scares me when I see guys that I was best friends with, like, you know, Greg Kovacs and Matt Duvall and Eric Fromm and all these guys just dropping, you know, like flies. That to me is scary. And a lot of guys, you know, there's been some suicides and there's been some other wacky stuff that's gone on. So that just tells me that people haven't recreated themselves. They're not happy anymore. They can't be the bodybuilder they were, and they have no other interest. And when that happens, there's no reason to be alive anymore. And unfortunately, that usually leads to bad things.
A good segue into that is actually a very good old friend of mine and good friend of yours too, Anthony DeRezzo.
Yes. Who
I met. There was a company called Daniel Chapter 1. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, the biomolecular nutritionist. Mm-hmm. And I used to actually work for them, and he was coming to I just started working. They said, "Oh, Anthony's coming. Wait till you see this guy." And I had never seen anything like Anthony. I was about 17 when I met him. And he walked in the door, and he turned sideways to get through the door. And I'm looking at this guy, and I'm like, holy shit. And over time, of course, you know, being around, you wind up becoming friends. He was from Johnson. I lived in Warren. Like, we were in the same spots and stuff, and we became friends. And I moved down here to the D.C. area, and I got the call one day that said, "Look, Anthony died." And I was like, what? What do you mean he died? And, you know, they kind of, you know, I've heard all the stories and stuff. It's still hard to figure out what exactly went on. I know you were there with him. Yeah. He was having some health issues before. I mean, he had a tricep tendon tear. He had like a hip problem. I mean, he had some issues like tearing body parts and stuff. But what happened, like, you know, I mean, from what I knew of Anthony, it was like his whole thing was about being pro in bodybuilding. Like, he didn't care about anything else. And he seemed like he never kind of got over that. And I think it was 46 he died. Is that right?
Yeah, he was young. Him and I were very tight friends. I remember meeting him for the first time at the Junior Nationals in '95 when I won there at the heavyweight class. He came up to me backstage. He's like, "What the hell are you doing? You're fucking shredded." He was like all so impressed. And he was big then. He was doing nationals at that point already. And I had just really been I was just getting into the national scene. And I'm like, well, you know, and we became friends, and we would talk on the phone all the time. I would go up to see him. He'd come down to see me, you know, because he was in Rhode Island, as you said, and I was on Long Island. And we developed a really good friendship and bond, and, you know, that lasted probably a good, you know, 20 years until he died, probably. But, you know, at some point, I remember we were in Vegas at an Olympia, at an after party, and he was sweating profusely, and he was not looking good. I said, "Anthony, you don't look good, man. I think you better go back to the hotel room." He's like, "Yeah, I can't stop sweating." So when he went back, you know, whatever, everything was great. When he got back home, he went and saw the doctor, and he found out that he had a cardiomyopathy, and his cardiac output was like terrible. And he's like, "Dave, I'm not going to live. And I said, "Stop saying that. You'll be fine." And he started doing a lot of cardio and got himself back in shape. And, you know, he was really watching what he was eating and everything like that. And it seemed like everything was all right. But I know he was on some meds for it. And he just, he said to me, I didn't know, this was 2 years, now 2 years goes by, and he's still pretty damn big. And I'm like, "Anthony, what's going on? I thought, why are you so big still if you have a heart problem?" He goes, I want to do the Masters Nationals. Will you help me? I'm like, "Anthony, I don't feel comfortable. This is not good." I said, "You know, you could give yourself a heart attack. You have what he really needed was a defibrillator implanted in his chest. They should have done that. If they would have done that, because he was having arrhythmias. And when you have arrhythmias, if your heart goes into a weird rhythm and it can't get out of it, you die, basically. And if he would have had a defibrillator in him, if anything would have happened, there would have been a safety net there, so to speak. Yeah. So he decided to do the show. We were, whatever. I helped him only so that to keep him safe, and we weren't going to use any diuretics, nothing like that could cause blood pressure fluctuations, because that can cause arrhythmias. And I took pictures of him in his room. He was posing for me. And I said, all right, I'm going to go to the gym. This was in Pittsburgh. When I come back, we'll still have 2 hours before you get on stage. He's like, okay. So I go to the gym. As I'm driving home, I get a call from the guys that were staying with him. They're like, Anthony, he passed out. I'm like, what do you mean he passed out? He's like, he passed out. We can't wake him up. I said, and what does he look like? Well, he's like, he looks blue. I said, well, you better start, you better do some CPR. So I called Victor Prisk, the doctor extraordinaire there, and I said, Dick, you got to get up to Anthony's room. I said, I'm on my way back. So by the time I got back there, Victor was working on him CPR. They had called the paramedics. They came with an external defibrillator. They started, shocking him. It was too late. He died. He must have had, he had a heart attack. He had an arrhythmia, I guess, and he couldn't come out of it. And by the time they got there, it was too late, and he died. He died in the hotel room at the Masters Nationals. And it was really, it could have been prevented had he got the defibrillator. He felt like for some reason that would make him look defective. I don't know why. It could have been maybe averted if he would have just lost weight and said, screw, I'm done with the bodybuilding. But he was a guy who would rather die than give up bodybuilding. That was his passion. That was his only passion in life. And this is really a metaphor for a lot of bodybuilders out there who just cannot get past this is what they want to do and they have no other interest. And I'm telling you guys out there who are watching, if you do not change your tunes and find new passions and rediscover yourself and reinvent yourself, you will die young. That's an absolute fact. The body is not meant to be 300 pounds, when you're 50 or 60 years old. It's too stressful to the body. If you want to live a long life, be smart. In your 20s and 30s, your body can handle a little more stress than most people think. But as you start getting older, over the age of 35, you got to really start rethinking your strategy. Not everyone's going to listen to me. Most people are going to say, you don't know what he's talking about. But unfortunately, we've seen way too many good people, die.
Yeah, my wife is actually she's actually a cardio nurse. Mm-hmm. She does heart transplants, bypasses. Wow. She works in CVOR, and she said that basically the main thing that they see over and over again with every single patient is, it doesn't matter whether it's muscle or fat, it's that high body weight. That high body weight for extended periods of time that's not brought down to a healthy level. Yeah. With the increased blood pressure, 95% of the time they're going to wind up on her operating table.
Yeah, it's true.
So, what do you why do you think nowadays, this is going to kind of transition from talking about the Anthony and how he couldn't get past being a pro bodybuilder. That was his main goal. Like, he wasn't going to stop till he turned pro.
Yeah.
Why do you think that so many people, and I did, when I was younger, I absolutely thought that there was like a secret drug stack that got those guys to that size. Like, there's a secret, and once you turn pro, it's like they give you the secret. Like, Joe Weider's going to come to your house and write it down on a piece of paper for you, and all of a sudden you're going to become Olympia champion. Why do you think that so many people think that?
Because I think people think in general that drugs are the answer to everything, and it throughout the years it's always been that way. I mean, when I was competing, we were always trying to find out what Dorian was doing. I hear Dorian's taking IGF-1. He's the first guy, I hear he's taking the 18 IUs of GH a day. That was the big thing back then. Nowadays, it's like I got to take 48 different peptides. I got to inject 6,000 milligrams of test. Everyone thinks it's drugs. It's not the drugs. We all know that it's the food you eat and the way you train. The drugs are just are a catalyst that makes everything happen better. Is there a magical stack? No. And I've said this before. I think you could take testosterone alone and GH and probably look as good, as if you took Trenbolone, DECA, Equipoise, Masteron, Winstrol on top of with the testosterone. I just don't think that the anabolics do that much more. I think the magical combination is two compounds together, so testosterone with something else, because with steroids, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, it equals like 5. But when you start adding 3, 4, 5 compounds, you don't get that exponential expansion anymore. It's just the 1 in 1. So testosterone with something anabolic combined with growth hormone seems to be the magic formula for building muscle and getting ready for shows. And then, obviously the guys use clenbuterol and cytomel, which is T3, to help with the fat burning process. Throw in on top of that some anti-estrogens to inhibit estrogen production, like Arimidex, Femara, or Aromasin, and that's your basic stack. We've all done the experimentation. 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams of testosterone per week with 500 or 600 milligrams of an anabolic is all you really need. We're talking 2 grams of gear a week is plenty to build muscle at a maximal rate with the least amount of side effects. I recommend that people stay away from orals, but I know guys that pound orals. They can't eat. They feel like crap all the time. I could talk from today till next week about the same subject, and some people will listen and some people won't. Right. But there's no magic formula. I just gave you the formula right there. There's tweaks here and there and around there, but there's nothing magical about it. I like IGF-1/2 in the off season for growth purposes if it's used correctly. But that's been the newest thing really to come out. I don't find that any of these peptides that I've seen on the market have done anything close to what growth hormone has done, or IGF-1 for that matter. And I don't think we're ever going to see anything that's going to be stronger unless we get a true myostatin inhibitor. And the problem with inhibiting myostatin is that you got to be doing it 24/7. You got to find a way to alter the genes. There's no drug that you can take unless they somehow discover some kind of long-acting myostatin inhibitor that's going to work on the body 24 hours a day. I don't think we're going to see anything significant, at least not in the foreseeable future. So are there any magical stacks? No. It's like saying that you buy an entertainment center and it's disassembled and you say there's a magical way to assemble it. No, there isn't. There's the instruction booklet. If you have the instruction booklet, no one, and the person who designed the entertainment center wrote the instruction booklet. There's not a better instruction booklet out there that doesn't exist, okay, that exists. Because there's only one instruction booklet for that entertainment center. There's only one instruction booklet for our body. While we're still figuring out everything, we kind of know how to build muscle. We know how to make a big bodybuilder. I mean, look at Big Ramy, look at Dorian, look at Ronnie. They didn't use anything that's not available today. Okay, they just most of the guys I mentioned train their asses off. They eat great. And they're consistent, and they have good genetics. Genetics is a huge component in bodybuilding. We all know that. I always said anyone can build muscle and burn fat. But
drugs I took, the bigger I would get, the better I'd be. Until I started training. This is going to 2009. Kevin Levrone and I became good friends, and that was his first transformation he did naturally back then. And he put on like 35 pounds in like 3 weeks of eating like a banana a day, the most random shit you've ever seen, and barely training. And I was like, there's something totally different to like this guy, you know what I mean? I was like, this is why these guys are like this. But, I know guys that literally took, all they could get was that Brovel testosterone back in the day because you couldn't get like all this underground stuff. Yeah. They would take 2 bottles of that a week and they'd be contest ready for a show and win. Yeah. It was just, that's all they could afford to take. It's all they could get.
Yeah. I know guys that have used a lot less than that, and you would never believe it in a million years if I told you what they were using. So genetics is a huge component. They always say that steroids are the answer to poor genetics, but it's really not. Anyone can put muscle on and anyone can get lean, but that doesn't mean it's going to look good. And that's why there'll be great bodybuilders and there'll be guys that are excellent, that are good bodybuilders. I feel that I was a above average bodybuilder. I think I was a very good bodybuilder only because I was so tenacious in my quest to build muscle and to be ripped. So in essence, I looked really impressive where people said, oh, I like that look, I don't really want to compete. I would love to be that big and ripped though. And so I found a niche for myself. I guest posed a lot. I did a lot of seminars because of my medical school background. And so I found a way to make money without having to be a professional bodybuilder or win any pro shows. So for me, I took my genetics, which limited me structurally, but I used the freak, factor that I was able to achieve to find a niche. It's like what Rich Piana has done today. Rich is not an aesthetic-looking guy. He's not going to win the Olympia. He wouldn't even win a local show with the way he looks now. But he found a niche to make money, and that's what he did. And my goal in bodybuilding was always to make a living doing what I loved. And I thought it meant turning pro or winning the Olympia, but little did I realize that there was other avenues to make a living in this industry.
Exactly. Now, they're back in the 90s, the guys that were the 300-pound mark. I mean, I'm not sure how many of you know. Obviously, you never know what somebody's taking unless they just came out and told you, and then you don't know if they're fucking lying. But, for a 300-pounder back then, would you say those guys were taking more than the guys nowadays? Or do you think the guys nowadays are taking more than those guys were?
the guys today probably take more than the guys back then did. But the guys back then probably had better gear.
Yeah.
Who knows? No one knows what the hell they're taking nowadays or what it's dosed at or anything like that. For me to tell you I took 1,000 milligrams of testosterone a week and grew, I'm not lying. That's what I took.
Yeah.
Dorian said he took less than that. I don't know if that's true or not. But that only Dorian knows that. I know Greg Kovacs probably heard that I take 1,000 and he probably took 3,000 milligrams because he probably thought that I was lying to him. So I'm sure Nasser was the same way, from what I know. I don't think that. I think that was more of an oddity rather than the general theme. I don't think Dorian took more than 1,000, 1,200 milligrams a week. I don't think Ronnie Coleman took more than that. So once again, I think that a lot of people think, well, if so and so's taking this much, I'll double it and I'll get better results than him. And we know that that's not the case. Because if I thought that 1,800 milligrams of testosterone a week was better than 1,000, I would have done 1,800. But I experimented and it wasn't better. I felt terrible on it. I felt like I had the flu. I got very water retentive. I felt lazy and sluggish, and I didn't grow any better than when I was on 1,000. So why take more? So, there is a variation between people. Some people do need a little more, a little less, but it's not very great. It's within a couple hundred milligrams.
Exactly. Very cool stuff, Dave. I appreciate it. I mean, not many people are. I mean, nowadays they're more apt to be open about it, but back then nobody talked about it. You know what I mean? Nobody really talked about what they were taking, and if they told you something like, "Yeah, I take a CCA test a week," and you're looking at this guy who's 280 pounds, you're like, there's no way. And I also agree that the drugs nowadays are not what we had back then. I remember taking those Syntex anadrols, and you could take one, maybe 1.5 of those and have like nosebleeds. You'd gain like 25 pounds in 4 weeks. These guys nowadays are taking 4 anadrol a day, and they're 180 pounds. Yeah. I'm like, there's no way that this shit is what we had back in the day. It's just not.
Yeah. I tend to believe that too, but I think a lot of people also use that as an excuse to take more stuff. I know Boston Lloyd does. Boston Lloyd will tell me, well, I use 5,000 milligrams of gear a week because I think that it's only like a third of the strength of what it says it is. So I'm really not using that much stuff. That's how they rationalize it in their head. Same thing with the GH. I mean, when I was coming up, I was, in 95, I was using, Humatrope. I was paying $220 for 12 IUs. But the stuff was real. I was taking 2 IUs a day, and I was getting good results from it. Nowadays, guys are using like 18 IUs a day, and they don't even look like they're making improvements. So I don't know. Either the stuff is no good, or people are not eating right, or they're depending too much on drugs to grow as opposed to training. When I was in the 90s, and I hate to say, when I was a young guy, back in the 90s, training was the most important aspect of bodybuilding. People still viewed that as the most important factor. How much weight can you lift? How much can you squat? How much can you bench? How much can you shoulder press? Dorian Yates was out there doing the high intensity training, with these crazy amounts of weights. That was what people, thought about. Blood and guts. That was Dorian Yates, and that's who I looked up to. That's who I wanted to be like. And nowadays, it's not like that. Nowadays, it's like, well, how many grams of test are you taking? Well, Boston Lloyd said I should take 6,000 milligrams. And this person told me I should take 25 IUs of GH, and this guy and Nilo said I should take 80 IUs of insulin a day, and it's just about dosages. You don't hear anyone talking about training anymore. It's crazy. No one talks about training.
Barbecue. I was at a barbecue. It was like my girlfriend at the time. Her friend was getting married. I was in Minnesota. And I'm sitting at the picnic table eating, and this guy sits down next to me. Never seen him, never met him before. Didn't look like it even worked out. And he sits down and he goes, "Hey, man, I take 400 milligrams of Tren a week. What do you take?" And I looked at him, and I was like, who the hell? What? I'm like, it caught me so off guard that I didn't know what to say. I was like, what? I was like, I'm just trying to have this chicken and potato over here, and I'm going to be on my way.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, people are nuts with the dosages nowadays. It's just. Look, if it wasn't for Dallas McCarver and Akeem Williams, I don't know if anyone would even talk about training at all. Those are the only 2 guys that I see really lifting crazy heavy weights anymore. Look, I'm sure I'm leaving out people. There are people that train hard. I know Guy Cisternino trains his ass off. But I'm just saying, as far as lifting crazy heavy weights, Akeem and Dallas are it right now. And I'm glad to see that someone's still doing it and holding the torch still up there. But if you look, those 2 guys are the biggest 2 pros out there right now. Yeah. And it's because they train hard, and they train heavy. And if that doesn't send a message to everyone else out there watching this, then I don't know what to tell you. Look at the biggest guys in the history of the sport and see how much weight they lift. Even Big Ramy. Big Ramy doesn't look like he trains heavy, but he does. He's lifting the 200-pound dumbbells he's pressing. Come on. Yeah. Just because just because it's easy for him doesn't mean that he's not, working hard.
John De La Rosa came back from training with the Camel Crew and Ramy out there, and he said, dude, he goes, they call Big Ramy, he goes, because he can move some big friggin' weights. He's like, you don't see it all the time on the videos and stuff on Instagram. He goes, but that dude can move weight. And it looks like he just picks it up and it moves. I think a lot of people see them kind of repping out in the gym and stuff, like, either during the warm-up sets or kind of like, a finishing pump set. And they're like, oh, Big Ramy trains light. And I'm like, no, Big Ramy doesn't train light.
No. And, you want to be big, you got to lift big. If you're not willing to put your body on the look, I have a lot of injuries now. I need 2 shoulder replacements. Luckily my back is still intact. But when you put your body on the line like that, look at Ronnie Coleman. He had a lot of injuries. 8 back surgeries. Dorian Yates tore a lot of muscles. If you want to be huge, you got to risk it. You have to risk it. You have to get under that bar. And you have to say to yourself, I don't know if I'm getting this weight up. I'm going to try my damnedest to get this thing up, but I don't know. Because I know that if I put it on the line with this type of weight, if I get it up, I'm going to put on some serious muscle from this. And that's the attitude I had. I wasn't afraid to die under that bar. I was like, I didn't want to, and I took every precaution to be safe. I had a spotter. I used the right equipment. I was focused. But I knew that I was probably doing damage to my body long term, but I didn't care because I wanted to be the biggest guy out there. And I just don't think enough people are willing to go there in the gym. They're willing to do it with the drugs. If you can give them a bottle and say this stuff will kill you in 10 years, but it'll make you huge, they'll inject it. They have no problem doing that. But they don't want to put their body on the line in the gym. I don't know if it's just because they're lazy or because it's too hard or what the reason is. But if you want to be the best bodybuilder out there, you got to put it on the line.
Honestly, I think a lot of them nowadays are doing it not really because, when you got to the gym, it wasn't like you wanted to be an Instagram star or you were going to make, all this money and stuff. You saw people in the magazines on the covers and stuff. You're like, I'd like to do that. But it was because you were training, you loved training. It kind of transitioned into competing, and you're trying to take yourself as far as you can because you're pushing yourself. These guys nowadays, they'll take that bottle because they're like, I don't want to do all that training. Yeah. I don't want to get under that bar and get hurt. I can't tell you the last time I saw someone. Well, actually, that's bullshit because I train at the gym with Aaron Clark. He trains at my gym.
Yeah.
And that dude will just he does 500-pound squats with no belt, the end of his leg workout for 20 reps. But he looks like a brick. You know what I mean? He's so damn dense.
Oh, that's
all
why.
The time.
That's why because he lifts. He lifts weight.
Well, Dave, I appreciate it, man. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope we can do this again, man.
Absolutely, Jerry. Anytime for you, and we'll have to get you back on another Iron Debate. We'll pick up some good topics. Maybe we'll talk about the Rich Piana racism, racist voice message that they played the other day. What do you think about that? Well, I got you here.
Well, I didn't delve into it because I feel like there's a lot kind of missing on it.
Yeah.
There's only that one side of the conversation. It's him. So what is this woman saying to egg him on? Dave, I was addicted to Nubain. I was taking painkillers. There are blank spots in my memory that I don't even remember saying shit to people that I said. Mm-hmm. And Rich mentioned that he was taking stuff, not just steroids, but, painkillers and stuff like that before. So it's like for him to not remember it, I can actually believe that. But, that word, the N-word, it's just not in my vocabulary. Even if I'm singing along to Tupac in the gym, my brain skips that word for some reason. I don't know. But that's just the way I was brought up. I was brought up that's basically just a word to hurt people. So even if you want to hurt someone, it's too far.
Yeah.
But I also have had, relationships that have kind of gone awry and been cheated on where I absolutely said things to hurt the other girl. And, I'd step back and I'm like, why the hell would I say something like that? You know what I mean? It's not in my personality, but I said it anyways.
Right. So you can call your ex-girlfriend a whore, but because she cheated on you, and that's actually true. But using the N-word, with regard to some guy or whatever in the gym, really has nothing to do with her. It's not hurting her. It's hurting to the guy. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't judge people, and I believe everyone should be forgiven. And I don't think that Rich has done that recently. But that's, I guess, for the court of public opinion to try him on, not me or you. I don't think that we should judge anyone, to be honest with you. I think only the guy up there can judge us. and we should just forgive and move on. And hopefully, Rich, this is a wake-up call for him never to ever utter those words out of his mouth again.
I mean, I'm pretty close with Rich. I spent a lot of time, with him personally, hanging out and stuff, and I've never heard him say anything derogatory, whether it was a person's appearance. Like, he'd never even be like, "Look at that fat guy over there." He would never even say stuff like that. You know what I mean? So, like, it's kind of hard. It's really out of character for me to hear that. At the same time, I think he's embarrassed by it, and I think that, will it do damage to his reputation like everybody's thinking it will? Partially, I think it will, but like Dog the Bounty Hunter had this same type of thing happen. Someone recorded him, and I think eventually people just kind of move on with their lives, and they're like, well, I either support Rich or I don't, and fuck it, who cares?
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I don't think that, like I said, I don't think we should be judging Rich. I think Rich is sorry that came out. Obviously, he must have known it was out there. I don't believe that he forgot saying it before. I know that drugs can make you lose your memory. I don't believe Rich. I think Rich knows he probably was out there. I'm sure someone was threatening him with releasing that. I don't believe that he didn't know that was coming out. And maybe someone was trying to blackmail him, and he said, "You know what? Fuck it. You do what you want." And that might have been what happened. I don't know. Because all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this thing is released. It could have been released when all the confrontations went down, months back, but it didn't. So something must have happened. Rich might have been, who knows what happened. Maybe Rich will talk about it at some point, and it's out. Hopefully now, people will forget eventually, and Rich can move on with his life. But, and it always sucks when something like that comes out, because I can't even imagine how Rich must feel, because he must feel like a complete idiot. That this is out. I know he doesn't, he's probably sorry if he did, even if he said it intentionally, I'm sure he's sorry now that he said it. So at this point, the industry likes Rich, they like the content he puts out. Either forgive him or don't watch his channel anymore. You have, it's an easy solution.
I agree, man. Cool. Well, Dave, anything you need from me anytime, as always, you just let me know, and hopefully we'll be in touch soon and do this again.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everyone to, check out all the programming on RXmuscle.com and on RXmuscle YouTube channel. And all Jerry's subscribers out there, he's got more than we do. Click the subscribe button on RXmuscle's YouTube page, because if you do, then we might have more subscribers than Jerry. So help us out here, guys.
They're going to be confused right now. They're going to be like, I don't remember tuning into RXmuscle, but I guess I'm listening. I don't even know.
RXmuscle YouTube channel. Click subscribe, and we will continue to give you this great content. I will get Jerry on Iron Debate next week, and we'll have a great show. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave. We'll talk to you soon, brother. All right.